the next team in our analysis is Punjab Kings. So Punjab Kings this time did not have Preeti Zinta at the auction table. Instead, we had Nes Wadia. And every time Nes Wadia was bidding high, it seemed that he was like delving into his Provident Fund accounts or his crypto wallet, whatever it is, to see if he could afford to buy somebody. And then there was Anil Kumble sitting there with two masks. One, I guess, was for COVID, and one, I guess, that was for the Shastri Kohli combo. But later on, I think he got rid of the second mask. They had a big purse starting off because they didn't retain a lot of players, and they made some very major buys, very major expensive buys. But after all, this is Punjab Kings that we're talking about, which, in my opinion, again, has been one of the weakest managed teams in the franchise over the last more than a decade. So let's start off with its retention. So it started off by retaining Mayank Agarwal and Arshdeep Singh. And straight off, you can see that there is a problem here, because why wouldn't they retain KL Rahul? So it's obvious that they wanted to retain KL Rahul. But KL Rahul, and it was speculated and it was fairly obvious that KL Rahul did not want to continue to play for the Punjab Kings franchise. It was not really a matter of compensation. He could have taken the top bracket, and I'm pretty sure Punjab Kings was going to pay him that top bracket. But he wanted to, and he was going to get captaincy. So he had been there. He was selected by Punjab Kings as the long-term prospect to build the franchise up. And he's had a stellar last two IPLs. I think he was the top scorer. So there's no reason why he shouldn't have been part of Punjab Kings. I mean, as a player, he would have wanted to be part of Punjab Kings so that he could build this franchise himself in the way that, for instance, Dhoni has built, or in this way that Rohit Sharma has built their franchises. But he chose to leave this franchise, which kind of harks back to one of the systemic problems which I believe that the franchise has. So they went with Mayank Agarwal and with Arshdeep Singh. And this was, again, a little surprising that they chose to go with Arshdeep Singh. I understand that they chose to go with an uncapped player because it would not affect the purse that they have as much as if they had gone for a capped player. It was, some ridiculous rules in terms of, the bans and retentions. I'm not getting into it. But I wondered why they didn't retain, for instance, Shah Rukh Khan and Arshdeep Singh, because they spent quite a lot of money later on to buy him back. But whatever it is. If you look at the 11, this is a solid looking 11. It starts off with Shikhar Dhawan and Mayank Agarwal. And Shikhar Dhawan is perhaps as good a replacement as you can get of KL Rahul. Maybe not KL Rahul because Shikhar Dhawan doesn't have that much of a future that somebody like KL Rahul has, who is in the salad days of his career. But, fairly good opening batting order, because you have like left hand, right hand. Mayank Agarwal is the dasher. Dhawan is the more conservative player. But again, he can score centuries in T20 games. He's had a great run in the last few IPLs for Delhi. So this is a very, very good opening batting order. And then if you go to the middle order, then you have Johnny Bairstow and Liam Livingstone, which again is an explosive middle order. Very exciting 1, 2, 3, 4, I would say. And the presence of, and this is important because this is something which Gujarat will not have, which Roy will not have, is that Roy will not have a middle order to fall back on, and will not have that level of independence to go for the shots that, let's say, a Mayank Agarwal is going to have, even Dhawan is going to have, because they know they have a player of the caliber of Johnny Bairstow and Liam Livingstone. Again, Livingstone hasn't really set the IPL on fire yet, but he's done very well in some of the other franchises, and his price tag proved it. The fact that everybody wanted Liam Livingstone. So he's seen as a future prospect. He's a handy bowler, very, very big hitting batsman. So very, very good 1, 2, 3, 4 for Punjab Kings. And then the 5 is also very good. There's Shah Rukh Khan who's coming in. Again, Shah Rukh Khan has had very limited opportunities in Punjab Kings, but he comes with a great reputation as being India's best finisher, dasher. So it will be very exciting to see Shah Rukh Khan play. And besides the name, of course, naam to yaad hoga. But again, he was in Punjab Kings. I think that they waited too long to play him. But I'm pretty sure he's going to be part of the starting lineup this year, at least based on the money they spent on him. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, perfect. Then is the problem. The sixth player, there's a gap. Who comes in? Rishi Dhawan? I mean, this is just a huge fall from what we have had. So there's this gap in the sixth player slot, which again would possibly be Rishi Dhawan or maybe some another uncapped player, but I don't know who's going to go there. And then you have Odean Smith, who's again up and coming, hasn't proven himself in the IPL. You know, you have these players who are the next best thing from West Indies. We select them, and they're a little bit of, you don't know, there's a little bit of randomness in Odean Smith. But again, you would think that with the players that they have, you know, Odean Smith might not mostly be needed, but he's still there. Then you have Harpreet Brar and you have Arshdeep, who are, you know, who've been part of the Punjab Kings franchise, have performed well for them, and a good T20 bowlers. And then you have the firepower of Rabada, and you have Rahul Chahar. So if you look at this team, and it's a good team, you roll the names off, and it sounds really nice. So positives, you know, solid openers with dual role for Punjab Kings, long game. Dhawan plays the long game, Mayank plays the short game. You have an explosive middle order. You have a very good finisher in Shah Rukh Khan. What more could you want? And then you have Brar and Arshdeep, who are good T20 bowlers. And you have Rabada, who provides, you know, that classic pace. Again, he's kind of been off the boil recently, but he's just a class act, and you can never go wrong by betting on absolute class. He's just amazing bowler, Rabada, with everything in his armory. So this is good, but the negatives is that it's just missing that one Indian player in the middle order, which might come to hurt them. And another thing is they've decided to put all their eggs in the English basket, which for me is never a good thing, especially because the English board, he doesn't always want to play ball with IPL. I mean, they have their own franchise and their own brand that they're trying to create. So it's usually they're not as open to negotiation with BCCI as some of the other boards are, like West Indies, let's say, even New Zealand. So the problem is that they have two players from England who, one of them, Bairstow, is going to play Test, One Day and T20, and one of them, Livingston, is going to play One Day and T20. So if both of them are not available, then that blows out a huge hole in their middle order. And now the team doesn't look that great anymore with them. So it's an amazing first 11. But when Bairstow and Livingston aren't available, I'm not sure, looking through their roster, that they have anybody comparable to cover for them. And that is going to put a lot of pressure on Shikhar Dhawan and Mayank Agarwal. So overall, I would give them 8 out of 10. This was a good auction for them. But again, I think the loss of KL Rahul is going to affect them, because, you know, when you're building a team around this one icon player and the icon player chooses to leave, it takes some time for the players to come back and kind of coalesce. And who's going to be the captain here? I don't know if they've declared a captain here yet. I would say that they would, I mean, again, they'll possibly go with Shikhar Dhawan, I would think. I don't know if Mayank is still at a captaincy material, but they could choose to kind of look to the future and just make Mayank Agarwal the captain, and then Mayank will leave after some time. But I think that the best option would be to go with Shikhar Dhawan as their captain. I would give them 8 out of 10, purely based on that first 11. But I'll dock 1 point for them because they're Punjab, because they're not a very strongly managed franchise. And if you've seen Chennai Super Kings, you can see, and Mumbai Indians have had a great team also, but with Chennai Super Kings, you can see what good management can do, even when you don't have the greatest of teams. So again, points 8 out of 10. I would again deduct 1 point just because, it's Punjab. So moving on to the next side.